Good evening, everyone. I'm Kate Harrison, the Associate Dean of the Keese School, and tonight's lecture is about the Islamic Golden Age in Morocco. As Europe was very slowly emerging from the Dark Ages, Morocco was at its height of creativity and a center of discovery, innovation, and artistic expression. Lisa Harper, our presenter this evening, is a retired U.S. senior intelligence officer and a former CIA colleague of Asbury resident Bob Reinhardt, by the way. There he is, right there. Lisa has lived and traveled extensively in Morocco, and we are fortunate that she is here this evening to share her research, insights, and personal experiences. Welcome, Lisa. We have a slight technical difficulty here.
Yeah.
Frank, do you want?
How do I?
Frank is coming.
Okay. I want presenter view.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that good? Yeah. All right. Well, before I start, I want to ask, how many of you have been to Morocco? Whoa! How many of you intend to go to Morocco? Excellent. Okay. So this is a particular period of time, but I just wanted to whet your appetite with two real masterpieces. Two masterpieces of Moroccan, it's not really art, it's architecture. One is the Al-Qarawiyyin Mosque in Fez, 9th century, and the other one is the Koutoubia Mosque in Marrakesh, and that is just a little bit later in the 12th century. Oop. What's happening? The slide's not advancing. Could somebody come and help me here? The slide's not advancing the way it should. I have a clicker. It's not clicking. Hit the down button. Yeah. It worked at home.
You have this?
Yes.
Oh, there it goes.
Okay.
There you go.
And this is also just to get you in the mood. I wanted to show you a short film clip of the Louvre exhibit called Medieval Morocco from Africa to Spain. It was at the Louvre in 2014 to 2015, and it is the best, its catalog is the best single source on medieval Morocco that you could find. And to my great chagrin, after I'd done all this research, I discovered the book. And so anyway, this is the book. And this is going to show you some of the material art. It's really not art for art's sake. Every object is something that was used either in worship or used in private homes. Can you hear the music okay? Okay, good. These are copper-cladded doors, probably from a mosque. This is the mirhab. This is where the sermons are given. This is calligraphy, very important in Morocco. Morocco developed its own script called Kufik, and stone sculptures, textiles, wonderful textiles, stucco, carved wood. And these are tiles known as gelige. Here's some more gelige. a ewer. And I'll put in a plug for the Louvre. Next time you're in Paris, go and see the new Islamic rooms at the Louvre. They're just stunning. Okay, so now to get down to the talk. I'm going to tell you what led to this Islamic Golden Age, of course, what happened during it, and then what the legacy is. So if you're going back to Morocco, you can, you just will see how many parallels there are between the past and the present. So, okay, why does this Golden Age matter? Well, its contributions fueled the Renaissance in Europe. Because in Morocco, as in Al-Andalus, which is Moorish Spain, they were translating Greek and Roman works, which had been lost in time, but preserved in Arabic. And they also, the Moroccans engaged in a lot of original scholarship that led to great breakthroughs in the sciences. The tangible achievements of this civilization are visible and relevant today. And you'll see as we go through that it really kind of informs some of the cultural debates today. And we saw advancements in architecture, art, sciences, and crafts. And then there are also intangible contributions that are in the political system, the economy, and social attitudes. So what does it matter to me? All right, you've already seen this picture. This was kind of the ad for you to come today. And my husband and I spent 10 years building a medieval home in Tangier, and that's what got us started. It was a folly, and it made me, I had to take a deep dive into medieval Morocco. I have to explain that my husband comes from a Moroccan family. He's a Moroccan American. His name here is Charlie, but there it's Abderrahman, and he had 18 brothers and sisters. And they all had opinions about how we should build this house. Very tough. So anyway, my word to you is, if you want to build a house in another country, you will learn all about the culture. This is the best way to do it. Now, this is our home, and it's along classical lines. My husband wanted this to have the same kind of house that his father grew up in Marrakesh. So it has an inner courtyard, and then you see on the right, you see the 2 stories. So downstairs, you have a basement with a Turkish bath, a steam bath. Then first floor is your reception rooms, and then second floor is where people live, and on the room is where you get the best view of the Mediterranean. And these are some of the details, and every single part of this is dictated by tradition. The painted panel, let me see if I can use this, the painted panel up here, the stucco work, and by the way, the stucco work is done by Sufi mystics, and these guys go into a trance as they're sculpting the wet plaster. And it's like in medieval days, when they come to your house, they'll just stay there until they finish the work. And you feed them, you house them, and you listen to their trance music all day. And then on the right here, this is a steam room, and this again is traditional. And Moroccans will, either if they don't have one at home, they will go to the hammam every week. They think that it's much cleaner than taking a regular Western shower. All right, so before I get into Morocco, I just want to give you the context of the Islamic Golden Age worldwide. And what you see here are these little guys are Islamic scholars in Baghdad. This whole Islamic age started in Iraq, in Baghdad. And behind them are books. Libraries in the Middle Ages were extremely important, and scholars would travel thousands of miles just to find one book, probably an old Greek text that had been translated. And this comes up, I don't know if any of you have watched Prime Target streaming. Well, this is Beit al-Hikmah, which means House of Wisdom, and it's a part of the plot of this thriller. But it was an actual place, and this is a picture of it. So what was this Golden Age worldwide? It was from the 8th to the 13th century, when Arabs, after the death of Muhammad, ruled an empire stretching from the Middle East to North Africa to South Central Asia. And they assimilated the knowledge of the many civilizations they overran. The scientists within this system, if you want, made significant advances in math, medicine, sciences. They were mostly all polymath. When I was doing my research, I was amazed that every one of these scientists was also maybe a doctor, and he wrote poetry on the side. More men than women, although we do have some women in this story. There's material culture. I'm calling it that because I don't want to call it art. But in architecture, ceramics, metalworks, textiles, woodworks, calligraphy, you saw that earlier in the little clip. But also literature, poetry, and music. And poetry and music during that time is all the same. All poetry was recited. As with music, it was chanted, really. And same thing with the Quran today. So one of the things that I found fascinating was that the Islam of the time supported rational thought. You don't find that with extreme Islam today as it's practiced. And they went in for evidence-based science. And these people weren't looking for the ultimate truth to be inculcated. They were embracing ambiguity and ambivalence. And this is an important part of the story, too. Their idea was that God granted reason, not just faith, to humanity. So this is just to show you the spread of Islam. You know, North Africa all the way to Afghanistan. And this was a 12th century Moroccan geographer's idea of the world. This is the world. His name was Ali Idrisi. And he worked, if those of you who've been to Portugal, you know that Portugal was tremendously influenced by Islam, and he worked in Portugal, and he also worked in Sicily for the king of Sicily to draw maps. Okay, so what about the Islamic, we're finally getting to the Islamic Golden Age in Morocco. Okay, it lasted from the 8th to the 15th century. It was 2 centuries longer than in the rest of the Islamic world. It reached its height from the 11th to the 13th century. It also had an empire that stretched from North to West Africa to Spain. And also, its trade and its influence extended to Egypt, Near East, Sub-Saharan Africa. Think of the word Mauritania. Mauritania belonged to Moors before Morocco ceded it. So that's why when you go to Morocco, the Medinas, the walled old cities, are known as imperial cities. It's because there was an empire in the Middle Ages. There is, of course, one other imperial city that's not from the Middle Ages, and that's Meknes. And that was, I'm not going to include that in my talk, but if you go back to Morocco or Meknes is certainly worth seeing too. So this is to give you an idea of the Moroccan Empire at its apogee. It included all of the Maghreb, or North Africa, and plus a goodly part of Spain, and for some years of Portugal. Now, people always say, oh, well, there was this Islamic Golden Age in the Middle East and in Morocco, but it was the Dark Ages in Europe. So I looked into this. Was it really the Dark Ages in Europe? Well, this is what I found. So 13th century, those of you who've been to Paris, La Sainte-Chapelle, okay? Sorbonne, 13th century. Well, not so dark, maybe. Early medieval Europe was truly a dark age with intellectual and scientific decline after the fall of the Roman Empire. But by the late Middle Ages, Europe was leading in scientific discoveries, in part because of the contact with the Islamic world and with the Byzantium. And in both, you see similar developments. You see the rise of new political forms of leadership, the use of one religion to legitimize rule, agricultural economies, expansion of trade, territorial growth, hierarchical social structures. And I mean by that truly all of this learning didn't go very deep into the society. It was really reserved for ruling elites. And then you start slowly seeing a distinct national rather than regional identity and also language emerge in each country. So what led to this golden age? Why was it that, that there was this explosion? Well, it was knowledge from indigenous peoples, pre-Islamic foreign traders, invaders, and settlers, the Arab conquerors, and Moorish Spain. It was also religious institutions and their teaching, religious, racial, ethnic, and cultural tolerance, very, very important in this story. Good governance. You can't support all of this without a good government and a sound economy. So here was one of my aha moments. When I was researching this, I discovered that it was really the Berbers and not the Arabs who brought you the Golden Age. I had just assumed that it was the Arabs, but no. Here you see Berber warriors. Has anybody, I can't see you saying, but anyway, this is called a tuburida, or a fantasia, and you can see it in Marrakesh too. And they're Berber warriors who race their steeds up to a point, and the idea is to fire your musket all at the same time, and the ones that are the most coordinated win. Well, the Berbers are the ones who launched the Golden Age and sustained it. And these people have been in Morocco since Neolithic times. They're really the indigenous peoples of Morocco. Then you had pre-Islamic foreign traders, invaders, and settlers. So at first you had, the great traders of the Levant. You had the Carthaginians, you had the Phoenicians, and you can see traces of Phoenician life in Morocco today. In Tangier, where I live, you can see Phoenician tombs. And this graphic I'm showing you it's a modern Tunisian tile work, but it shows, I don't know, they must have been Phoenicians. And it's the desire to copy these ancient, this is based on a Roman model, the desire to copy this that led to the creation of the famous Moroccan tiles, the Jalige. And so these people all brought their culture, their languages, and when they did my husband's DNA, they found some really interesting things because he's a product, like so many Moroccans, of a real mixture of groups. So, of course, there's no golden age without the Arabs. And this is a Sasanian plaque dated 1160, showing a Byzantine bowing to an Arab conqueror. So this is kind of a form of propaganda. And I'm showing this because I want to emphasize the impact of the conquest on the Golden Age, and also to kind of put in a marker there for Byzantine Christians, because they tried to repel the Arabs. They fought with the Berbers to keep the Arabs out and ultimately failed. And the leader of the Berbers was a woman known as Al-Kahina. She was a warrior queen. Anyway, but the Arabs finally conquered and took over. So here's something else that I found interesting. There would have been no golden age without religious institutions and the teaching of the Abrahamic holy books. Jews have lived in Morocco for 2,000 years. They lived with the Berbers in the mountains at first, and then successive waves of Jews came and lived in the big cities. Christians have been in Morocco for 1,700 years. Descendants of Arab conquerors have been there for 900 years, and of course, the Berbers have been there since time immemorial. So what's important about these holy books is that they encourage people to learn to read and write, and they encourage learning. And I thought I'd just run through a few quotes from the Quran about the importance of knowledge. So the Quran says, "Read in the name of your Lord who created you." Another one from the Quran, "Allah will raise those who have believed among you and those who have given knowledge by degrees." Then you have two quotes from the Hadith. The Hadith are kind of like the Gospels. The ink of the scholar is more sacred than the blood of the martyr. And seeking knowledge is an obligatory upon every Muslim male and female. And there's a story about a female slave whose owner did not educate her, and the bad consequences that came from that. Everyone was expected to have an education. Okay, so I also found that there's no golden age in this story without tolerance. And the picture you see here is from a wonderful book of illustrated, it's a chronicle of medieval history called the Cantigas de Santa Maria. It's a Galician Portuguese song book, but it had a lot of good history in it. And if you go to Madrid, you can see it in their National Library. So I asked myself, okay, were these guys really tolerant? Really? No. Well, it's true that Muslim, Christians, and Jews worked together to revive and apply this ancient knowledge. And of course, each dynasty had a different level of tolerance. The Almohads, the third one, they tried to force conversions to Islam. Then they had a tremendous brain drain, including Maimonides, the great Jewish scholar. And plus, you had them, people trying to be pure Muslims and expel others. And then you would have the Catholic popes writing letters to the caliphs, which is what they call the kings in those days, and they would tell them very sternly, you better not do this. And even during the Crusades, this correspondence continued. And so generally, during the Golden Age, as long as Christians and Jews paid a special tax and obeyed a special legal charter, they participated fully in civic and intellectual life, and there wouldn't have been a Golden Age without them. And of course, good governance. Okay, now, the original Arab conquerors were terrible rulers. They were like a lot of conquerors and colonizers. They just wanted to ship the money home. Unfortunately, they were also shipping Berber maidens home. And the local population didn't like that at all. But the rulers, what they did is that they created a central authority that still exists today in Morocco. The national identity is based on God, the country, and king. Allah, Al-Watan, Al-Malik. And what that means is that the king is both head of government and head of religion. And this has really contributed to the stability of this kingdom over the centuries. I also like the Almoravid kind of campaign slogan, spread the truth, curb injustice, and abolish illegal taxes. I mean, you could use that today, I think. And they also chose a moderate form of Sunni Islam called Malikism. And they enforced it, and it helped them to legitimize power and to keep the more zealous in line. And as I hinted at before, there was an educated urban elite that reaped most of the benefits. In Morocco, it's known as a mahzen, and these people still exist today. I'm going to talk some more about them later. So there was peace and stability most of the time, and when the economy slipped and the tribes started warring, then that was time for a regime change. So what happened during this Moroccan Golden Age? Here you see some Moroccan scientists at work. I'm going to tell you that right now. And I'm going to base this part of the talk on the 4 dynasties, because it's just easier to go dynasty by dynasty. We start with the Idrisid, 8th to 10th century, Al-Moravid, 11th to 12th, Al-Mohad, 12th to 13th, Marinid, 13th to 15th. And I just wanted to give you a complete list of the scientific and intellectual advancements in Morocco during this time. Astronomy and navigation, medicine, surgery, pharmacology, mathematics, philosophy, social sciences, agriculture, irrigation. They were really good at irrigation. And some of the irrigation systems that they set up are still working today. Engineering, architecture, geography, exploration, arts, crafts, music, literature, poetry. Not bad. So this is the first dynasty, the Idrisis, and it has an interesting history. The guy, let's see. here at the bottom, this is Idris I, the founder of really of the Moroccan Empire. So, and he has an interesting story. Okay, so in 791 CE, he had to flee Iraq because his family was going to be massacred by other claimants to the throne of, to the power of Muhammad, of the Prophet. And so he fled to Morocco, and he was taken in by a Berber tribe called the Auraba, because he was back in Baghdad, he was an Islamic judge and a Qadi, and he knew his Maliki law. So he eventually married Kanza. Some people say that she was a princess, others say she was a concubine, doesn't matter. And they settled in Volubilis. Volubilis is this beautiful Roman town that you can see today that's been restored, and it's really worth it. He brought in Arab settlers to this town, and they mixed with the Christians and Jews who were already there. Now, there's a big fight going on as to whether he was a Shia, a Sunni, or just the first to claim legitimacy through descendants from the prophets. And he is the first of what they call the sharifs, or in plural in Arabic, shorfa. And these are people who claim descent from the Prophet Muhammad. They're kind of the nobles of Morocco, and they still have a lot of power today. And just to mention the one Moroccan I know best, my husband, he is descended from two royal lines, the Idrisids and the latest one. So anyway, Harun al-Rashid, the Baghdad Caliph, who is the bad guy in a lot of the stories that you read, you know, Scheherazade and everything, he saw Idris I as still as a rival. And so he had him assassinated. But luckily, his wife Kanza was pregnant, and she gave birth to their son, who took power as Idris II. And he held power until 974 CE, when the Almoravids take over. Okay, so what did they do? What did the Idrisids do? They set up a central government, they united warring tribes, they increased trade, they founded Fez as the center for just about everything. By the way, Fez is my favorite Moroccan city. I really feel at home there. They created centers of learning at all levels, often through the Quranic schools, the madrasas. But I don't know, they didn't produce any world-class scholars. That comes later. But they also taught this evidence-based science, and they were promoting, of course, Islam, Maliki law, of course, and the Arabic language, and this comes through later on. Arabic wasn't really adopted until the most recent, well, after independence in Morocco, the government tried to promote modern standard Arabic as the official language, and they failed miserably because most people spoke the Moroccan dialect. Anyway, so the Idrisids had wonderful architecture, and here you have this, one of the gates to Old Fez, which the Idrisids founded. And then I want to show you this on the right here. You have an Idrisid era riad, or B&B. So when you go back to Morocco, if you want to live in an authentic 9th century courtyard home, this is the one. It does have some modern conveniences, but it's pretty spare. Okay, now I want to talk about centers of learning. And there's a tendency to think that women really had a very subservient role in Islamic societies. Well, in Morocco, it's not always the case. The person who founded Al-Qarawiyyin University in 853, some people say 859, but somewhere around there, was Fatima al-Firhi. She was born in Tunisia. Her family came to Fez. After her father's death, she and her sister inherited a lot of money, and they used it to build this university, which is the oldest continuing university in the world. And as a matter of fact, my husband's niece whose name is Firdaus, which means paradise, is studying feminist Anglo-Saxon literature there. So this is just a little clip on the importance of Al-Qarawiyyin.
The Moroccan city of Fez is home to some of the oldest cultural treasures in the world, including the oldest existing educational institution, Al-Qarawiyyin University. Many believe its library is also the oldest in the world. Now it's undergoing restoration.
Al-Qarawiyyin University was founded in Fez in 859. That makes it the oldest continually operating university in the world. Its library holds some of the rarest and most unique manuscripts in the world, and it's undergoing a restoration to preserve these treasures. The most prized items in its collection are protected behind an iron door with 4 locks and separate keys. In the past, each key was held by 4 different people. Today, the curator is the only person who has access to the room where the rarest texts are kept.
What gives it its importance and value is that it contains a human heritage that interests the entire world. It has a rare heritage that you will not find in other libraries. It's because of these points that we have the restoration work and the care for this library.
The facelift is also bringing the library into the 21st century and will make its collections more accessible to the public. For instance, the library now has a laboratory for treating, preserving and digitizing the old texts.
I'm here, as you mentioned, for reasons of scientific cooperation with some universities here in Fez. The idea is to try to improve preservation of this wonderful, world heritage, cultural heritage, to approach the problem from an information science perspective. I mean, the main aim is to provide, means and tools, both in terms of hardware and software, to digitalize this cultural heritage and to make them available in an open way to
unfortunately,
the
you
world's
cannot
knowledge.
visit the whole institution. You can take a peek through the big doors and see the courtyard, but you can visit the library. So I recommend that. It's a beautiful place. Now I want to go on to architecture. The sister of Fatima al-Firhi, Maryam, built her own mosque and madrasa religious school called Al-Andalus. And it's another very beautiful building that I encourage you to visit. Now I want to get to scholarship in Fez. And one of the most noteworthy scholars was Pope Sylvester II. He wanted to come to study at Al-Qarawiyyin in the 10th century because it was the most advanced university in mathematics. And the Pope, who was French, his name was Gerbert d'Aurillac, endorsed and promoted Moorish and Greco-Roman mathematics and astronomy. He reintroduced the abacus, and he introduced the decimal system using Hindu-Arabic numerals, and he was the first to invent a mechanical clock. And he chose Al-Qarawiyyin to study in. And this is Idrisi craftsmanship, again, mainly adornment to architecture. And you'll see this throughout Fez. Now we're going to go on to the Almoravid. Very different group of people. They're Berbers, and they're going to come out of the desert, as you can see from this guy, this blue man of the desert, who was one of the warrior monks who invaded and took power. And then here's some of the guys. The guy on the far left is a Christian mercenary working for the Arabs, and then the other one, Ahmad Saif al-Dawiya. I don't know who he was. Anyway, the Almoravids were the first real Berber dynasty. They originated in the Sahara Desert and in Mauritania, and their Arabic name means warrior monks. It's al-Murabitun. Their leaders were really austere, orthodox. They followed Maliki law to the letter. And as converts to Islam, they were stricter than the Arabs. They were very strict Muslims. And their first caliph, Yusuf ibn Tashfin, founded Marrakesh and led the conquest of Spain. They went on to conquer Senegal and Niger with African and Christian mercenaries led by a Catalan called Reverter de la Guardia. And unfortunately, by the mid-12th century, they'd gotten used to a very opulent lifestyle. There were a lot of Berbers who felt that this wasn't Islamic, and they were corrupt, and so the regime fell. But before it fell, they consolidated power, and they really established the idea of the king, the caliph, as dual head of government and religion. There was good governance. They controlled a large territory. They gave lavish patronage to scholars, artists, and intellectuals. And they promoted religious unity. And one of the smart things they did is that they ignored Sufism. Sufism is a form of spiritual mysticism. And it was very disruptive in Moroccan history, but the Almoravids just let them do whatever they wanted to do, and that worked out just fine. Okay, there's very little, if you go to Marrakesh, there's very little Almoravid architecture left because their successors, the Almohads, destroyed it all. There is a building that a lot of tourists don't go to that's very pretty. It's a Kuba, Al-Quba al-Baroudin in Marrakesh, and it's where people did ritual ablutions. You know, with Islam, you have to wash before you pray, and this is where they did that. And then there's another madrasa that's absolutely beautiful called the Ben Yusuf Madrasa, which you can visit. And now, there were really significant scholars in Marrakesh. One of them was Averroes, that's the name that we know him by. He was a polymath. Listen to this. The guy wrote about philosophy, theology, medicine, astronomy, physics, psychology, mathematics, Islamic law, and linguistics. And he had really a profound impact on Western civilization because he was a guy who integrated it all. He was integrating Islamic and ancient Greek thought. And he was asked for commentaries on Aristotle and Plato by the Caliph. And these works reawakened European interest in the ancient classics. He was born in Cordoba, and then he worked in Marrakesh. And he was also, as happened a lot, the personal physician to the Caliph. And you'll see that all of these scholars, everybody fights over whose scholar they are. Are they Spanish? Are they Moroccan? Maybe they went somewhere else. Some went to Egypt later, so are they Egyptian? But he did live and work in Marrakesh. Another guy that I found very interesting was Ibn Tufayl, who wrote the first philosophical novel. There were really no novels before his time. He was another polymath. He was a theologian, astronomer, also vizier, which means, advisor to the caliph. He was a physician, and he was the first proponent of autopsies and dissections. And you can find wonderful illustrations of medical books with some poor little guy being dissected. He wrote his philosophical novel, The Living Son of the Vigilant, and it's still considered a major work of Arabic architecture. All right, craftsmanship there. You've already seen another picture of this. This is the minbar. This is the carved wood podium where the imam speaks. This is copper cladding of a door at Al-Qarawin Mosque. There are also incredible textiles made during this period, and most of them were preserved in Spain because the Spanish made religious vestments out of them, and those were kept in the churches. This particular one was brought to Spain by King Alfonso VII after he defeated the Almoravids, so it was kind of a prize of war. And you really can't see it, but it has a beautiful pattern with gazelles and griffins. So now we come to the Almohads. This is also from this book of songs that was also historical chronicle called the Cantigas de Santa Maria. And you can see the guys in the turbans over here on the right are the Moroccans. And the Almohads were also warriors. But they were not from the desert, they were from the high Atlas Mountains. And their name in Arabic was Al-Muwahidun, which translates as those who proclaim the oneness of gods. And they really thought they were the chosen successors to the Arabs, and they thought they were going to save humanity on Judgment Day, no less. And their founder, Ibn Tumart, was an Islamic preacher from Tinmal, and a beautiful mosque was built in his honor, which unfortunately collapsed during the earthquakes last year. This is a man who studied abroad for 15 years before he seized power. And thanks to him, under the Almohads, they set up an educational program based on Plato's Republic that had physical, military, and intellectual components. Now, the Almohads tried to reform mores. They were very puritanical, too. They wanted to reform legal practices. They didn't favor any one school. And they let Sufism develop into brotherhoods called zawiyas, which exist today. And my father-in-law was the head of one of these Sufi brotherhoods. So the Almohad achievements, they built architectural models, they imposed doctrinal conformity and centralized religious and political authority, they expanded their territory, they encouraged learning, and once they got the work, they understood that really leaving the communities together was more profitable to them, they really encouraged the exchange of ideas. And the Almohads had their share of scholarships. Scholars, you've all heard of Mohammed bin Maimon or Maimonides, who was credited to be one of the greatest philosophers of all time. And he had a rationalist view of Judaism, and he was influenced by rabbinical, Arabo-Islamic, Greek thought, especially Aristotle. And he lived all over the place. He was born in Cordoba. He had to flee Spain to Morocco. Then he had to flee Morocco, and he ended up in Egypt, where he became the personal physician to Saladin. Remember Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, who fought the Crusaders? Well, he was his personal physician. And then we have mathematics. We've got a guy named Ibn al-Bana al-Marakshi. He invented fractions. He codified timekeeping. He's the first to use the word almanac, and he lived in Marrakesh, Fez. He also lived in Spain, and he wrote all kinds of books of practical knowledge, so we know what their astronomical instruments were, and here you see some of his works, which we still have today. And then here we have an astrolabe. And an astrolabe was a scientific instrument that was used by astronomers, navigators, and astrologers to solve problems related to time and the position of stars and planets. It could perform a lot of functions. It could determine the time of day or night, find the altitude of celestial objects. It assists in navigation. And this is usually the complement. They had to be made to very specific specifications, and there were artisans who did nothing but this. And then Almohad gold coins were legal tender throughout the Mediterranean because the weight was true, and they were also very beautiful, so they circulated wildly. And then here you have the new Almohad copper chandeliers of the Al-Qarawiyyin Mosque. Now we'll go on to the Marinids. This is really the last dynasty. And this is late 13th to 15th century. So the Almohads succumbed to succession struggles, weak leadership, poor governance, corruption, the usual thing. And so the Marinids seized Marrakesh, the Almohads fell, and the Marinids were a really interesting bunch. They were Berbers, but they claimed to be Arabs, and they claimed to be descendants of the Syrian Umayyads They were the first ones to conquer Spain, the Iraqi Idrisids, and the Prophet Muhammad. Okay. But they too, they benefited from the fact that the Reconquista in Spain was really going strong by that time. And a lot of scholars and musicians, artists fled Al-Andalus and came mainly to Marrakesh and Fez to continue their work. So these are, I'm saying, they're Berbers claiming to be Arab Shorfa, descendants of Muhammad. So what did they do? They sponsored Maliki Sunnism. They integrated Sufi spirituality into the legal framework. They built schools. They promoted the education of scholars. And they helped to form this special Moroccan cultural identity. Moroccans are very patriotic, and they, you don't mess with them. You don't criticize. I learned very early in my stay there that you don't criticize. Of course, you don't criticize Allah, but you don't criticize the king, and you don't criticize the country. Just stay out of trouble. They made Fez their capital. They undertook massive urban renewal. They encouraged architecture and crafts. And really during this period, this last period, this was when you had just the height of the craftsmanship and art. It's kind of like the Baroque period, in very refined and intricate, and this is something that you can see both in Marrakesh and Fez. So they founded New Fez, Fez Jadid, in the 13th century. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this mosque here, Al-Atarin. It's no longer functioning as a mosque, but UNESCO has spent a fortune restoring it. It is absolutely beautiful now, if you haven't been to Morocco lately. And it has a collection of instruments used in making crafts that's fascinating. So don't miss that one. And it's right next to Al-Qarawiyyin. They're all pretty much together. So here's a little clip on Marinid Fez that I wanted you to hear and see. And of course, bookmaking, I haven't talked about that, but that's a craft, middle-aged. Oh, and the tanneries. Weaving. Irrigation. I don't know who this guy is, but anyway, it's not Moroccan. Okay, so quickly, I'm going over time. So Ibn Khaldun, the greatest social scientist of the Golden Ages, worked in Morocco. So did my favorite fellow, Ibn al-Khatib. He was a poet, a physician, historian, but he's a very bad politician. And he ended up being condemned for heresy. It was really getting at him because of his politics. And he was buried in this under one of the corners of one of the gates of the city. And he wrote, I'm not going to play that because we don't have time, but then Ibn Battuta, you must know, he was a great explorer. He really made, you can see how far he went. He wrote an excellent book, and there's a new museum dedicated to him in Tangier that is worth it. You have embroidered Islamic banners that were seized by the Spaniards and preserved in Spain that are marvels. You have calligraphy, stucco, tile work. This is all Marinid work. But then, okay, there's palace strife, unruly Berber tribes spread unrest. You had unsuccessful military campaigns to restore the empire. Then you had the bubonic plague, the same plague that rampaged through Europe, hit Morocco in 1348, and that led to the decline of the Golden Age. Then the final kind of nail in the coffin was when the Portuguese seized Ceuta, undermining the regime. And by the way, Ceuta passed through royal marriage from the Portuguese to the Spanish, and it's still Spanish. It's an hour from Tangier, and it's part of the EU. Meanwhile, you had the Wattasids taking over. They were viziers, advisors to the king, and they gained control of the state, but they lasted over only 75 years. So in a way, what's the impact today? Morocco's going back to its Golden Age policies. It's trying to reclaim its lost territories in the south, the former Western Sahara. It's reorientating its global trade policy towards Africa and away from Europe. It's reaffirming its Arab identity and pushing Arabic. It's restoring the status of the Berber populations. Now when you see all the official buildings will have Berber script as well as Arabic and Latin script. And it's using medieval elements in its modern architecture and training modern artisans. There are schools all over the country teaching people how to do these medieval crafts. And so in conclusion, I hope I've shown you that Morocco had a flourishing civilization in the Middle Ages, which certainly rivaled the Islamic Golden Age elsewhere and eclipsed Europe. It was led by Berbers, it was influenced by many races. Its history informs cultural debates now. And thanks to UNESCO and other organizations, the masterpieces of medieval Morocco have been restored. It's really worth going back to see what's been done. So I ask you, what are you waiting for? Come and visit me, have a cup of mint tea in my Riyadh. Thank you very much. I thought it was so late. I've kept you here so long, but if you have questions, please. Okay. Oh, that's a long story. So my husband and I are bilingual in French and English, and we met teaching a group of French speakers how to disarm bombs. We were hired as French-English interpreters, and I didn't know a word of the vocabulary. I had to study like crazy because I went to French convent schools and they don't teach you that. So we met, and as it turned out, they could understand his Moroccan French better than my French. And so he ended up doing most of the interpreting, and I ended up writing everything down because I didn't want these people to blow themselves up. And I was afraid they weren't understanding what we were telling them. So anyway, that's how I met him. I can't hear you. I can hear you, yes. I'll repeat the question. Oh, it's not a painting. It's a photograph. But listen, if you want to just spend a good 5 minutes, look on YouTube. Look up Fantasia or Tabourida, T-B-O-U-R-I-D-A. And you can see both men and Berber women practicing this art. It's a lot of, it's fun. And if you go to Marrakesh, they do it for tourists, and that's okay too. No. Yes.
during the early periods. And you mentioned your husband's very erudite niece. And I was just wondering, in current Moroccan society, what is the understanding of educating women and having women have equal access to education, or no?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. So, under the current king married a very educated woman. She's an engineer. Actually think she's a computer expert. And he started a series of reforms. You know, Morocco is still under Maliki Sharia law. And especially the rules on family and inheritance were very much against women's interests. And the king, spearheaded a bunch of reforms called the Mudawana, which were not enough. And now there's a second wave of Mudawana. So now you'll find women in all layers of society, and they're women that are in the government as ministers, the women engineers. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than many other countries that I know. Yeah.
We have a working microphone now.
Are you living in Morocco now
We
and
live-
just visiting?
We live part of the year in Morocco. So what's happened is we go during May to July, and then in the fall we'll try to go. We go when the weather's the best. So if you go to Morocco, now with global warming, the best times to go are April to July, and then September, October, because it gets really hot in the summer. So we have a full-time guard on the house. We have a very mean dog. and we have I don't know if you know Malinois, these Belgian shepherds. Yeah, so our house is quite safe, and we're getting old, we'll probably have to put it on the market, which is going to be really tough for us. Yeah. Yes.
Does your husband have a lot of family there?
Yes, he has. My husband was one of 18 children. Same mother, same father. The father was, as I said, was a descendant of 2 royal lines. And he was also the hereditary head of a Sufi brotherhood. And they had the 18 children, then all those children had about 10, they had 7 to 10 children themselves. So it's a huge clan. And many of them have moved to Europe for better work opportunities, but there's still some in town that are in the country. And they're the ones who would say to me, "Oh, you can't use that fabric in the living room because that's not beldi." This is a word I heard every day. Beldi means traditional. So they were sort of the guardians of the flame, and that's why the house looks the way it does. If I were to tour, okay, I think the best thing to do is to go through a local tour agency. You rent a car, you take the direct flight, the nonstop flight, Royal Air Maroc from Dulles to Casablanca. Then after that, there are fast trains or bullet trains that can take you a lot of other places. And you do it in a car or by train, because you're just going to see a lot more. And you don't stay in fancy hotels. You want to stay in riads like mine, because then you'll have families running the places, and you'll have really sort of authentic architecture just right there when you wake up in the morning. Plus, they have the Moroccan breakfast is the best I've ever had. It's lavish, and so at these B&Bs, you get breakfast, and then for lunch or dinner, if you want to eat there, for very little money, they will make you Moroccan But in one of them, they kept saying, well, Lisa, what haven't you had? Goat. Ah, yes, goat. And then they would make a goat stew for us. So anyway, I think that's the way to do it. I think you have to see the 4 imperial cities your first time, and then I would head into the mountains and see the Berbers. It's really a different world, and much less advanced than what you'll see in the cities. And I would avoid Casablanca, frankly, because it's like New York. You know, it's not really Morocco, as far as I'm concerned. But if any of you, you know how to get in touch with me. If any of you are planning a trip to Morocco, I'd be glad to give you some tips. And I do have 4 pages of travel tips for Morocco.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa.
You're welcome.